Okay, just loading. Ready to go live on YouTube. There we go. Brilliant. We're live. Okay, so welcome to another group wiki coaching from the Backyard Peace Project. Today we're joined with our beautiful Connie and our wonderful Carol, who are both gorgeous global ambassadors within the Backyard Peace Project. And on a Wednesday, I tend to just bring a big topic, drop it, and let it roll. So what I wanted to talk about, guys, is the negative narrative that is in the world right now. There's so much out there. I can imagine that people are inadvertently getting into doom scrolling right now, because every channel you look at, every feed you look at, there is some arguments going on, there's some nastiness going on. One particular thread is the people calling out the misogyny of men, which I think is like a good thing, but at the same time, that's all we're seeing. And I understand that we need change, but I'm raising 3 sons, it's really affecting them right now. On, I'm scared to be a man right now. What does it look like? And you know that I'm passionate about sharing stories. And one of the things the Backyard Peace Project aims to do is to share good stories about good men doing good things in the world, because I need my boys to be able to look beyond their father and see who is out there doing amazing things. What does it look like to be a good man? And so I wanted to talk to you guys today about the negative narrative that's out there in the world right now. Where is the balance between keeping an eye on what's going on in the world, understanding the issues so that we can support the solutions, and sort of sacrificing ourselves to that narrative and allowing it to affect our decisions, our mental well-being, our nervous systems? Because I do feel there's a fine line there. And when we're bombarded, it's hard to find the safe path through. So I really wanted you guys to weigh in and tell me what you think, because I myself, with all of my training, like I even went to grayscale on my phone the other day, because I was like, I am really starting to get addicted to this scrolling. I need to cut myself off. Do you know what I mean? I need to take measures to go, no, that I need to sleep. I need to, because you do tend to fall down the rabbit hole and time disappears, awareness disappears. So I'd love you to speak to that.
I'd like to share a perspective, something that was shared with me a number of years ago by a psychologist who primarily worked with men. And he shared an interesting fact with me that I had never even thought of, that after the Second World War, men have made far less advances in society than what women have. So the Second World War changed a lot of things, because women had to work, right? They had to support their families while the men were off to war. And he said, that sort of started this, I don't know, this down spiral of men and what they felt they were worth. Of course, then the whole women's movement came along. And I think what's unfortunate, and this is where social media has amplified these messages even more. I mean, okay, yes, I'm a feminist in respect to, I believe that a woman should be paid the same as what a man is paid for the same job. And a woman should have the same opportunities in the right situation if she's qualified, just as qualified as the man is. But all of these movements like Time's Up, Me Too, all these things, it's amplified a few bad apples. It's like saying, well, all men are the same, right? And men could say the same thing. Well, all women are the same. And I think this is what's unfortunate, is it's just amplifying these things. And it's very brave, or no, let me retract that. It's very easy to be nasty when you don't have to be face to face to somebody. to leave an awful comment or whatever. And I often say, and sometimes women don't like that I say this, but I do feel sorry for men because I do believe that they're just being hammered down. And you're right. Like, one bad person, whether it's male or female, doesn't matter the color of their skin, their ethnicity, whatever, one bad person amplifies the whole story now on social media. And I think that's the thing that we need to be careful about. And be objective. Like, don't get it's easy to get drawn into it, but take a step back and think about it for a second. But it can be hard when you're scrolling on things. The algorithms see what you stop on, and if it's negative stuff, they're going to keep showing you more negative stuff. So anyway, I wanted to share that perspective because I do believe that it's gone too far now in the other way. And as women, we do need. I have women, I mean, I work with women in menopause, and women always say to me, well, men don't care what I'm going through. And I actually did a survey to ask men whether they were interested in what a woman experiences in menopause. And 89% of the men that responded, and I had a 30% response rate, told me yes, they are. But every woman I ask says no, they're not. And I say, you're wrong. They do, but they don't know how to ask because we persecute them or make them feel bad for asking the wrong way. So we have to have some kindness or stop for a second and think, okay, he doesn't know exactly how to phrase this question or whatever. So anyway, I want to share that perspective.
Mm. And I think as well, so many things came up for me while you were speaking there. And one of the things that came up are the social constructs that we've grown up with, right? So and the messaging that we've had from society, because I do feel that men have historically been treated differently to women. They
Yes.
don't face as harsher penalties if their offense is against a woman, and that is changing, thank God, because it shouldn't happen. Um,
Right.
and I feel, I mean, it's interesting the conversations that we're having, because there was a case in England where a police officer murdered a woman walking home at night, and there was absolute uproar about it. And there was a couple of girlfriends and myself discussing it on social media. We went to school together. We kept in touch. I'm not telling you how many decades ago that was. And one of our male classmates jumped in, nice guy, always got on well with him. He's a decent person. And he said, genuinely, I'm asking, why is the uproar now when this has been happening for decades? And he said, I'm not being controversial. I'm actually curious. Why has this been this massive reaction from women about this particular murder? And I said to him, you know what? And I won't say what his name is, but I said, from my perspective, number one, if you can't go to a police officer, who can you go to? Number one, that's like someone that you're supposed to be running to when you're in a crisis. And I said, and number two, we're not willing to tolerate for our daughters what we tolerated for ourselves.
Right.
So now we're in a different position. So it's an interesting perspective of how the conversation is changing and how men are curious and they are scared to ask. And he did sort of wrap his, I can't think of the word, pre-qualify his question in saying, I'm being respectful. I'm not trying to be controversial. I really am genuinely. So he was like, I don't want to be torn down here. I'm actually curious. I've got 4 daughters of my own. I actually want to be part of this conversation. And I do agree with you as well, Connie, with what you said. Is I feel like bringing these issues to light is important. Bringing
Yes.
the lack of equality, the lack of equal opportunities to be protected under the law, to all of those things are important to bring to the surface. These issues have to be discussed. But I feel like it's become an us versus them type conversation. And where's the focus on the solutions? Where are
Right.
the solutions? Where are the alternative choices, behaviors, education? Where are they being presented? Because I feel like if we continue this, it's going to divide us. And I always think of Nelson Mandela's leadership, being incarcerated for 35 years, coming out and saying, not right now, it's our turn, right? Let's come together. Let's learn from this and move forward together. And I feel like that's where we are with this issue now, is let's come together. Let's listen, let's talk, and let's understand that. I understand when you're saying about feeling sorry for men, in the fact that they've been pretty much raised since birth with this sense of entitlement. They haven't been taught any other way. And now it's case of us supporting them in re-educating and going, guys, it's not going to work anymore. You're going to have to up your game, because I don't feel like it was the downward spiral of men. I feel like it was the upward spiral of women. And
Okay.
men holding their position were like, hey, where are you going? No,
Right.
we've always held power here, but you're surpassing us. And so now we need to have that upward spiral for both. And if we're going to move forward together, that may be controversial, but that's how I feel. Carol, what do you feel?
Well, I think it's such a complex issue, isn't it? On so many lines. I think one of the dangers we've got to be aware of is not making blanket statements around, and I think that's what we get into, because we're fed by social media and the algorithms, the thing that we click onto, it goes, oh, you want to hear more of this stuff, and it keeps feeding you the same story, and then it makes us believe that that's the truth, that there's no other side to the story, that's it, and then we make the blanket statements, and that's something we need to be really careful of. And I think, when we look at individuals, we've got to look and go, these men have been programmed from birth, from the community, from their environment, from the male, perspective of who they need to be a man. And some of that's really toxic. So they have been developed to be entitled. They have been led to believe that the way that they solve problems, or the only way that they're valuable as a person, is by doing, not being. So they've never learned these skills. And I think if we can involve them in the conversations, then we can start to show that, like you said, that we want to be on the same team. We want to grow respectful relationships. But I think it's really tricky because, some men want to hold on to what they are. People are threatened by change as well, aren't they? So I think we've got to start looking at trying to make sure that we're looking for our own research. And I think, Connie, what you did was brilliant, actually doing some market research there and actually finding out really what they want, because we make these rules and generalizations and stories in our own head of what we think they are thinking. And it's our own perspective that we're actually projecting onto them, aren't they? And sometimes they're just lost. And some men really want deeper conversations. They don't want to sit in a pub and have toxic masculinity about how many beers I've had and and you'll be right. They want actually a deeper, meaningful relationships, and they're struggling. I think they're struggling to find that. I've certainly had men that come into my clinic room and they're just like, I just feel like I don't fit in, because men just want to talk rubbish. They just want to, all they want to do is talk about having a beer and, and sport or fishing. And there's no depth to, in the way that we talk, have a really deep conversation. Some of them want that too. And there's nothing for them out there. Finding that is really hard. So when they really want to change, there isn't really the space. There isn't the communities and the stars. And when you look up, there is stuff popping up now, the men's table and things like that. And I think as we support that and bring that and keep, hopefully we're going to start seeing more of a movement, because I think when men are disempowered and they feel weak, but they've been brought up, they've got to be masculine, we're going to see an escalation of aggression and poor attitudes, and even going into domestic violence around. I mean, that's such a complex issue. I'm not saying it's just all of that, but when people are feeling disenchanted, they feel that they're unworthy as a person, when they feel like they don't fit in a community. when they feel the need to push themselves to be accepted. I need to show you that I'm boss because then I feel safe. That's when we've got a dangerous community, isn't it? And I think this rhetoric of all men are the same is just amplifying that. We're actually, causing a lot of our own issues because we want to say men are so useless. And we might have complaints about them, but they have complaints about us. Um, but it's how do we give them the space? How do we show, like you say, Cathy, how do you show that there are good men out there who do want more than what they've been handed? As if we want more. We want better connection. So do they.
Have you found that this is a generational thing? Do you find that some of the younger generations of men are more open to these topics or discussions than some of the older generations of men? I'm just curious.
I think certainly, when you look in the 60s or 70s, they've had a lifetime of from when they were born to where they are now of having a certain way, and they can be, quite, oh, I don't want to, you're talking rubbish, don't talk about feelings and things like that. And we get that in the younger generation as well, because they, and I think it goes across the whole age range. I mean, I'm no expert to know, to have done enough research and understanding of how that shows up in the population. But I think there does seem to be younger men, you see them properly hugging each other now. You would never seen that when I was growing up. You see men coming in and go, how are you, mate? And giving each other a hug before they've been right. Now they're going in for a hug. That's a change, isn't it? From what
it's
it used to
lovely.
be.
Yeah.
So I think there is change coming.
Yeah.
But we do obviously have pockets of, where there's arrogance and it's all fear-based, isn't it? We talk about
what it is.
This entitlement. Yes, there's entitlement. Absolutely there is. And there's a whole lot of really horrible social media stuff that's affecting our children in schools. It's just frightening. So I feel like there's almost like we've got this toxic, entitled stuff that's been manipulated by community and social media. And then you've got this other group. It's almost like, and we're seeing it generally in the world, aren't we? We're seeing, I feel like there's this big divide of people who want more and passionate about love and, empowerment and goodness. And there's got this other that are fighting against it and are almost rebellious. And it feels tumultuous. That's what I get from it.
I do feel that like the toxic aspect for me, my opinion is that it's lazy.
It's what, sorry?
Lazy.
Lazy.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's easy, isn't it?
Well, it's seemingly easy short term. It's not easy long term because of the bridges that you burn and the reputation that you make for yourself and all that sort of thing. But I mean, for me, I was reading one of our ambassadors' posts, actually, Aaron. He works primarily with men, and he's a great guy, and he's sharing positive rhetoric, which is amazing, and I love his content. And he was saying, what's interesting, I don't know whether you've ever read any of the Outlander series. It's on television as well. And it's about this woman that goes through the stones, like similar to Stonehenge, and she goes back in time. And there's a guy called Jamie Fraser who she ends up marrying in this different time. So she's got a husband in the modern time, which I believe is like the 40s or something. And then she's got this husband in the olden days. And he was saying, why do women swoon over this character, Jamie Fraser? I'm pretty sure that's his name. Do correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. Right. And it's because he's totally strong, physically, emotionally, mentally, really strong, really solid. He's a warrior, right? But he uses strength to protect and defend, not attack. And so, you know, people swoon over him, or women and men, I'm sure, swoon over him because he is the epitome of positive masculinity. He is fierce. He'll kill if he needs to. He'll do all of these things, which I'm not condoning in modern day society, but in the times. And all of his strength and his power was controlled. Like, he was always in control. He was always strategizing and thinking. He didn't give in to his anger. And, you know, and you see that little muscle twitch in the jaw when they're like, oh, even I was like, oh my goodness, because, you know, you're so strong and you're not doing it. Do you know what I mean? That's for me what the epitome of positive masculinity is. And we were talking, and I was chatting to somebody, and they said, oh, well, you're lucky because your husband's a beta. And I was like, he's not a beta. Like, have you ever had a conversation with my husband? We're both alphas. Like, I'm very strong. I'm very independent. I'm very capable. I'm all of those things. And he is my rock. He is absolutely the one that I will go to. He is powerful. He is strong. He is all of those things. He doesn't control us. He doesn't threaten us. He's the epitome of strength that we run to in a crisis, right? And, you know, I know that if I need him to in any situation, he'll stand in front of me and he'll defend me. Not that we've ever had to do that, but I know that about our marriage. And he's very positive in his masculinity. And it's so interesting because I was thinking about this the other day, because I was looking at the program Adolescence, right? There was all this commentary on the program of Adolescence. Over here, Connie, there was a program called Adolescence, and it was about a teenage boy who murdered his female classmate. And it was really taking you through everything the parents went through and what the societal, and particularly what the father went through. But even the dynamics between the mother and the father, you could see the mother and the wife having to manage everybody's emotions, right? Which is exhausting. And so it was really interesting to watch that whole thing play out. And there's been a lot of conversation over here about that series. But it got us thinking, and I had a conversation with my boys. I did a big post about it. I said to my boys, how have you been immune to this toxic masculinity? Because I haven't actively stopped you from absorbing any of it. So how have you been able to resist it? And they were sort of talking about fundamental values, you know, the things that we've raised them to. The pillars of our parenting are kindness, integrity, honesty, hard work, you know, your handshake is your word, all of those sorts of things. That's our fundamental of parenting. And within that, they've become who they wanted to become. But also, we've discussed their big feelings and said, it's okay to feel this. It's not okay to express it in this way. And so we've always had those conversations. And I was interested to think, is it the mother's influence over the boys, or is it the father's influence over the boys? Because I'm like, how is this playing out? Because I've been the primary raiser of our kids, because Ian's been away 3 out of 4 weeks of every month. So he's only physically here 12 weeks a year, which is not a lot in a year thing. And they do talk on the phone, and that, obviously, very close family. But I mean, I suppose I've been on the day-to-day of it. So I was thinking, is it the mother's influence, or is it the father's influence? But one of the interesting things that came out of speaking with my kids recently was they mark their current relationships on how myself and my husband interact. And so my daughter is watching, going, that's the way I need to be treated. And my husband treats me very well, which is why we've been together 30 years. You know, we're in a partnership, we're best friends. And my son is looking at us going, that's how I need to treat my girl. And interestingly, when he slips, we're going, hey, look after your girl. So like, hey, that's not cool. It's not cool that you just served yourself first at the table. Make sure she's got food. You need to look after your girl. So it's interesting that, and I wonder, what is the influence? Like, home influence is obviously critical. So what is it? What is it that builds these positive men?
You know, it's interesting. It's amazing the wisdom that I'll speak for myself. It's amazing the wisdom I acquired after my mom passed away. It's almost like, I don't know, some divine intervention started filling my head with certain things. And my dad passed away 30 years before my mom. And in my family, my parents had a great relationship. They literally were soulmates. They had a fantastic relationship, very loving, very kind, and very similar values to what you have in your family. But I always saw my dad as the executor for everything. Now I know they discussed everything together, but he was the doer. So I always perceived my mom as somewhat incapable or weak, that, dad was always doing these things. And for some reason, I never saw it. But for some reason, when she passed away, all of a sudden it hit me. The kind of woman that she was, she gave my dad the strength to be who he was. And I never saw that. Like they were a team, they did everything together, they discussed everything together, but my dad really was the main doer. And there's nothing wrong with that. So sometimes, women are perceived, well, just like I perceive my mom. My mom was an angel. She was the absolute sweetest person you would ever meet. But for some reason, and maybe just because of the time that, I started working in the 80s, the women's movement was all about feminism, I wore a tie to work at one point because I was told the only way you get ahead is to think like a man. So my mom's femininity, which, has been a negative thing, that was her strength of how she supported my dad. And that's that's how our family worked so well, but I didn't see it. And again, it's those influences, right? It's those messages we're hearing or those stories that we're hearing. Like I say, when I started work, I was told, think like a man and you'll get ahead. So I had to let go of my femininity, or that's what I thought, to progress in the corporate world. So I think in my perception, I think we went through a time where it's like, well, if she's just a housewife, what does she know? What's her value? So there was some, arrogance around, I'm a corporate woman and I'm climbing the corporate ladder, and, I can do it all like a man. And I've had to reprogram my thinking after all of those years. So I think that sometimes that's some of the issue as well too, is that, the perception of a woman being supportive of her husband and not being used, because there are those situations as well too, but being supportive of her husband to make him, because that's what I saw Claire in The Outlanders, right? That she was there, like, Jamie said, like, you are my rock, I need you. And he would protect her, but she was also very, very supportive of him, right? And I think there's some of that breakdown in the family structure now of two people just kind of doing their own thing rather than supporting each other. And kids see that.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that, like you say, it comes from quite that community of our culture where it's about rewarding. You're only worthy if you're achieving something, and we feel like we need to do whatever we need to do to actually prove ourselves in some way. That, look at me, I've got a corporate job. Look at me, I've got a uni degree. So it's all about what you do, not who you are. And when
Right.
you don't can't hang your hat on what you do, then in some way we see people as less value. I've got a friend who, she was a nurse. She went on to be a police officer. Highly competent, beautiful woman. And her husband is also a police officer. And she decided, this is causing so much strain on my family, and my family is so important to me, that and the stress of it, because I think she really struggled with that sort of the the danger of it and everything else. And the police were desperately trying to keep hold of her. But she decided to run the house. And she said, you know, our home life is just not working. So she decided to stay at home. She said, because I want to feel secure. I want my family to feel secure. I want to know that things are done and that, you know, there's good food on the table and that people are supported. And she said, and I just feel like this is where I want to be. And it's almost like many people might look at that and go, oh, she's sold herself out, you know, she's just given up. And she feels embarrassed about it. I'm like, this is amazing. You've chosen to do something that's right for you and for your family, and it works. You don't have to make any apologies for that at all. You know, and I think sometimes women are so busy trying to prove themselves that we are
Yes.
worthy of a man or we're worthy of a career or what have you. And sometimes you just have to say, I don't give a monkey's what anybody says, what society says or anything. I'm going to do what's right for me in my life at my stage. And obviously, you know, having the respect of a husband on what she brings and the value is immeasurable. It's, you know, we're so focused on money in our capitalist system that we're going, you're only worthy if you're bringing money in, you're only worthy if you're getting this much money. Well, I'm sorry, no, you're not. You know, she's living in this ecosystem of this family that's functioning and she feels good because now she can take time for herself as well, you know. She's not trying to do everything. And I think, you know, we've got to look at that as to go, who are we and are we happy in what we're doing? Or are we still trying to validate ourselves as a woman, you know?
I do agree with you wholeheartedly there, Carol. And what's interesting is like because of what society says about, you know, we see it in movies, we see it in whatever we see it in.
Mhm.
And obviously, I was a stay-at-home mum for a long time. So I was teaching career. I paused that. I had my kids. We emigrated, and I was like, well, my kids need me home because they're all neurodiverse. We didn't have any family support here. So Ian and I had to become a really, really strong core of our family. You know, we needed to make sure that our marriage was good, that as individuals we were good, and as parents we were good. So we had to really up our game. And you know, what's interesting is my husband will come home and he will have 10 minutes at home and he'll go, holy mother of pearl. That's not quite the language he uses to me, but he's like, I can't cope with, he said, you know, in the space of 10 minutes, I've heard the word mum 27 times. And he said, it's dry. They're not even calling me. And he's the first to say, I couldn't do what you do.
Mm.
And it's being, you know, totally, and I'm talking primary carers. I know a lot of men that are primary carers now who are fantastic at it. Do you know what I mean? I'm not, this isn't a gender thing for me, but
No.
No.
you know, the capacity to hold what we hold, and the business that I've built around raising my 5 children. I said to my husband, sometimes I get a bit envious of you because you just show up, you have your week off, and you go out and you do your work, and you show up, and so it's either all work or it's all fun. And I said, and I am trying to build everything whilst holding everything, and it's like, but that's why we've got this capacity to have compassion, patience, a depth of understanding, and those qualities in leadership excel.
Yeah.
And so I remember a male relative of mine, I won't say who, was in lower level management in a chain store department thing in England for decades. And he would continually have these conversations that the men that had got the top management positions were weak and so too sympathetic and too namby-pamby, and they're this and they're that. And he had this conversation with me several times. And in the end, I went, can we just see the pattern that's emerging here? The men that are displaying these qualities that you are poo-pooing, that you are criticizing, that you are saying are emasculating, are getting the top management positions. Can we see a pattern? Do you know what I mean? Can we see something happening? And but he was so fiercely defending, as you were saying, Carol, what he felt was how to be a masculine man. He was completely bypassed for promotion every single time because he didn't have any of the qualities that were needed for that upper level management, which are qualities that a lot of men now display, but women particularly can display just naturally because of the training we've had for centuries of having to manage so many different aspects of so many different people's lives. But I do feel that what we need to be doing is amplifying the positive messages, amplifying on ways that we can come together, looking at the solutions. And what I have found is the men that I have encountered who are actually ready and willing to have these conversations and properly listen and properly want solutions that benefit everybody in the scenario have got a very, very solid sense of self, are confident to a very deep level of who they are as a person, and who've got a self-esteem strong enough that they don't feel threatened by having this conversation.
Right.
And so that's really interesting. And I just interviewed Lisa Plumridge, who's one of our other ambassadors for the Accidentally Inspiring podcast this morning. And we were talking about how when we're raising our kids, male or female, it's so important to create the opportunities for them to develop resilience. Because otherwise they come into the world, they hear the word no and they flip. They can't cope with it. You know, you're like, mostly we're going to get no's. Like, you need to know how to roll with that. You need to know how to dance with that. You need to understand that this is a redirection, not a rejection. And you need to have a self-esteem strong enough to go, that felt uncomfortable. How can I use this to move forward? And I'm finding that the men that are stepping forward, having these conversations, are the epitome of masculinity. They've got a very strong sense of self, and they're confident enough in who they are and their manliness that a capable, strong alpha woman doesn't faze them.
Yeah.
So I just, what are your top tips as we close off of how we can clean up what we are consuming? And I'm not talking about lettuce and water. How do we clean up what we are consuming? How do we direct our attention in a way that is going to bring us a sense of hope and not hopelessness? And that we can develop that inner peace within ourselves to be part of the solution long term. Carol.
Those are big questions, aren't they? I think
Wednesday.
we need to actively seek out organizations, people, when we see good conversations that are things, is share that material so that we, the material we bring into our algorithms on social media shows up within our friends, that shows up, and it's almost like that ripple effect. So it's like engage with that material, celebrate them, tell them how amazing it is, share it, because we often click on hate stuff and we might disagree with it, and then we look at it and then we keep getting that. We need to bring the good stuff in and support that and spread it and keep having these conversations, I think.
Carol. Connie.
There's actually a couple of really good feeds that I follow on Instagram that have positive messages. One particularly focuses on men. It's called Man Talks. And it's run by Connor Beaton. And he does a fantastic job of bringing up these difficult conversations about men, what they've been taught, the narrative, all that type of stuff, and coaching men through that. So I do recommend those feeds to men that I encounter that might be struggling or not knowing how to open conversations with their partner. The other thing that I try to do, I have men, I always introduce myself as the menopause navigator. And I do have men say, oh my God, my ex-wife was a, nasty word through that time. She was crazy. And I try to open the conversation and say, well, tell me more about it. to maybe help him. I don't want to totally change his mind, but maybe help him understand what she was going through. So rather than react to the conversation, how dare you call her that, try to understand, what he went through. And I know something that I do for myself personally, whether it's shows that I'm watching, I don't have cable TV, but I'm streaming things. I'm careful what I'm streaming.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm streaming negativity or violence or, those types of movies or shows, that has an effect on me.
Yeah.
And so I try to stream things that, I'm not streaming Disney movies, but I'm streaming things that are maybe somewhat reflective of life, but have a positive outcome or positive message in them. And I try to encourage other people to do that. I often say, well, I won't watch those kinds of shows because they upset me or they stress me or I find that I'm in a different mood. So, you know, like you say, all the things going in around the world right now, it's hard to completely close ourselves off from it. But if we make a concerted effort to control what we're watching and what's coming into our realm, that's, I think, a starting point as well.
I totally agree. I mean, my kids always take the mickey out of me because they say, not another sporting movie, mum. And I'm like, but they came together as a team. And then and I'm like, I love that stuff because I agree. Like what we feed ourselves in all ways is so important. And I'm always looking out for a movie based on a real life story and the courage and the hope and the against all of the odds and all of those sorts of things. And what I love about it, I mean, and I'll just quickly mention before we leave, one of the role models of positive masculinity, I would say, in today's society is David Beckham. So Posh and Bex were around the same time as Ian and I were getting together. So our journeys have been sort of adjacent. And I never really bothered with them. I wasn't a massive Spice Girls. I liked some of their songs, but I wasn't like a diehard fan. And Beckham was football, so I was like, I'm not interested in football. But I was semi-aware of stuff going on with them, but I didn't really know. And then I did actually watch their documentary, and I was like blown away with what they were going through at the time. I thought, wow. And he continued to show up.
Yes,
And
yes.
and so did she, in fairness, like she was treated abominably, really bad. And they both continued to show up. They both turned the other cheek. They both stayed in their integrity. They both behaved well. And I thought that's a really beautiful example of stepping into a very toxic situation and maintaining who you are at your core. And that's real strength, I think, to be in the storm and just keep strong and keep loyal to the fundamentals of who you are in your character, I think is amazing. So if you haven't watched the Beckham documentary, I suggest that everybody gets on there and has a look, because even when the team rejected him, he showed up every day and trained on his own on the sidelines. I thought, whoa, that's pretty impressive. He could have spat the dummy, he could have made a big deal, but he didn't. He just kept showing up, he kept doing his thing. And I thought that is a really brilliant example. So, ladies, thank you so much for taking the time today. I know that your practices are very busy, and I really appreciate it. And all that you do for the Backyard Peace Project. You're in my gratitude diary every night. So, thank you so much for being here, and thanks so much for joining us. And we will see you next time. I'll just make sure we're not streaming to live stream anymore.